Hello and welcome to the podcast Insights from Elsewhere. My name is Cynthia Portugal. I am Brazilian and I live in São Paulo, Brazil. I'm the growth director at Insight Platforms. Insight Platforms is an online media business that helps researchers find new tools, learn how to use them, and see what's coming in next in the industry. We host a directory, run conferences, and we create content for inside professionals. And we created this podcast to go beyond the big markets of North America and Western Europe. We are going to talk to professionals, insights professionals from Latam, Asia, Africa, and elsewhere. The idea is to find out how they are doing research, what's their experience with research technology, how they influence back their headquarters, and what are the specific nuances and curiosities about those regions. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Mitali Chowhan. She is the Director General at the Market Research Society in India, based in Mumbai. She has a vast experience both in the agency side in companies like TNS and on the client side in telecom companies such as Vodafone, Tel2, and Liberty Global. Mitali, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, how did you get into market research? Tell me your story.
Yes, so it was really when I was doing my MBA.
Yeah.
That was many years ago. And of course, MBAs are quite competitive. You have everyone quite sharp elbows saying, I'm going to get ahead and I'm going to be a CEO and I'm going to earn a lot of money and I'm going to be better than anyone else in the class and all of that. And, with all of this aggression and competitiveness, we were lucky enough in my management school to be taught by the CEO of Camta in India.
Okay.
And he taught the subject of market research. And he's a gentleman. He's no more. Ramesh Thadani, he's one of the giants of market research, was one of the giants of market research in India. And he just came up to the front of the room, spoke softly, didn't make much eye contact. And I think within the first 5 minutes, when I tuned into what he was saying, I was just swept away. I said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. This feels worthy. This feels something I can be proud of doing, something I will learn my entire career, and which is not going to be about just, conning people or being aggressive. It's about a certain truth. So I think I fell in love with the subject there. And yes, the romance continues nearly 40 years later.
And how do you see yourself shaping the industry? Because you were saying that you felt inspired by the CEO of Cantor at that time. And how do you see your role in shaping the industry, being in the front of the Market Research Society?
So one of the things that I do feel very strongly about, and, I've worked in different organizations, I've worked in different countries. And, in some ways, I feel that because we are perhaps so pure and so cerebral as market researchers, sometimes we sell ourselves cheap or we're just too pure hearted to be noticed and to stand up and to get credit for the work that we do. So I think that's something that, for me, the current role I am with the Market Research Society of India is second career. I thought I'd given up on working full time about 11 years ago. And the reason why I came back is because I saw this as an opportunity to say that we need to stand up and be counted. What we have to say is solid. And if an association can support, this is where we should be. So, if you're looking at, for example, our awards, everyone gives awards, right? It's been happening forever.
Yeah.
But what I am proud of, that when people from marketing, from advertising, media, they come to our awards, they say, give us, because, I want to go back and read. This is going to inform me. This is going to educate me. So I think that, the awards, even how our young researchers speak, how cool they are, the quality of our events. I think all of that is, I think we're absolutely fantastic. And it really feels great to be in a position to make everyone notice, even the press, things, instead of going to the sort of the typical first line rock star speakers, they know we're an industry that knows what we're saying and that are solid. And I'm very proud that we've been able to do these things.
That's amazing. And when you were like you mentioned that you were doing like events and trying to show more show off the research people that normally aren't good doing that, right? What
Yeah.
kind of content you try to prioritize? What kind of content you see that makes the eyes of the region like sparkle?
So I think what's important, and we've managed to do successfully, is that it should be authentic and unbiased and solid intellectually. So, there's a lot of content that can be packaged extremely well. And you don't always know what's underlying. It doesn't mean that there's not good work done behind it, but sometimes you miss that. Then, for example, if you have speakers, the speakers should be there because they have great content to give. It shouldn't be because, that people get a sense that, okay, there's a lot of paid speaker slots happening. So I think the balance is for that to be authentic, to be straightforward, to be have integrity in the purpose for which you're putting the content up there.
Yes, I see you. 2 days ago, I was at the ESOMAR Latin America.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I felt with the papers were they were exactly this authentic and very deep, a lot of consistent, but it lacked a bit of the impact in the business. Like we are so good in getting the results. And I know some of the papers I saw there, I know that they really affected how the strategy was coming out. But we are a bit shy to talk about this, about numbers and results and how that insight became something much greater and actually affected growth. We are much more into the side of talking about the methodology, how we got there, and how deep we understand people. But we are still very shy in showing off how much our work is important.
I think there also are barriers, right? So
Yeah.
to show impact, you need to share data which is owned by the client, and often for good reasons is supposed to be kept confidential, right? It's considered to be,
Yeah.
sensitive to competition, etc. So, some of the ways in which we have addressed this is, for example, our awards. We have 14 awards. And the pinnacle of those
Wow.
awards are impact awards. And it's very clearly in the judgment criteria is to be said that we're not looking for innovation, we're not looking for great methodology. We have other awards for those, but the impact awards is all about showing impact. Now, in that, we also say we understand you're not going to be able to put a lot of data, which may be company confidential. However, these are the ways in which we encourage you to at least be able to voice
Yeah.
over even if you can't share numbers, and they come to a jury. So I think that has been successful. And I think one of the things that also works really well is if you're able to get a partnership between client and agency, because I think it's important to understand the sensitivities at the client side and give a solve for that. Otherwise it just
Yeah.
previously keep saying, oh, clients won't share data. I mean, of course they won't. They have a very good reason why they won't. We wouldn't if we were clients.
Yes. But yeah, but I what I felt from the good cases that I saw, you don't share data, but you share outcomes. For example, the results of this research affected 15% of the margins of this area in the company. Or
Yeah.
you could say we could optimize portfolios in 75%, or you can
Yes.
still bring some knowledge. All of them were in partnership with clients, all of
Yeah.
the because actually one of the criteria was that you bring a client to speak with you. So I think that there is the possibility of as you said, you give some tips how you can talk about this. So I think that that's the way to go. Like, there are ways to talk about it and without mentioning
Yes.
names, numbers, and specific things, but to show how important the
Yeah.
results were. Because I worked in both the client side and the agencies as well. And I know how important research is in the client side and how much we are able to do with it, change the course of things, change how strategy is being landed. So I think we can show off more, right?
Yes, definitely.
Talking about the market research landscape in India, what is unique about it? Like, what are the challenges and the opportunities that you see in the region?
So I think this is probably similar to my answer about, making market research stand up and be, counted.
Yeah.
I think, and that's why I think your podcast is so amazing because often there's, perhaps a sense or a historic sense of
Yeah.
certain countries. And I think without realizing, even a little bit of a colonial sense. And, it's not anyone's doing it deliberately in the year 2026. It's just that, say, for example, textbooks are often new editions of textbooks that reference what was written 50 years ago, so I think these things are can creep into perception about countries and how market research is done in those countries. So I think that's something that I think I'm very keen to educate and disperse any knowledge gap that there might be of what it's actually like to do market research in India and what the industry is like here. And, of course, there are certain differences. If you have a city that was built by a monarchy 500 years ago, it's going to work quite differently from if you have a young city that's come up in the next. There are differences, and they are absolutely valid. But what I feel is that we do research, for example, in many ways we're far ahead of the curve of many countries or many, more developed countries. And I'll tell you why. And as you know, I have worked in Europe and in global roles with 22 countries. So, I do have some knowledge of this. So I think the first thing is that historically professionals are very, are really concerned about the basics and the principles and about what is the right way of doing things and why that is the right way of doing things. So, so if,
Yeah.
when we were chatting some time ago, even if you're looking at something like sampling, we reference what we learned in college on statistics, think about heterogeneity of samples, we think about these kind of things when we do work. We aren't facilitated by access panels, which people have forgotten where the sample comes from. And you just say, if I get a sample size of 300, it must be fine. We have this and maybe we do it, we overdo it sometimes, but it is very much in our DNA to say that, it's very important to say why you're doing it. Does it still hold? So I think that is one thing that I would share. And, even if you're looking at work that's being done on mobiles, even if you're looking at adoption of mobile phones, and how penetrated it is, across all kinds of respondents. I think that we are ready to answer these questions, and we ask these questions before we run out around and do a survey. So I'm not sure if I've segued a bit off your question, but I guess
That's
that's
exactly what
probably
I
one of
want
the
to know.
things. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, is there any particularities of cultural or behavior patterns that you see in India that are different from any other countries that you've worked before, and that some types of research, for example, they will not work the same way in India, or you have to adapt something specifically? Like, how do you do that?
Right. So I think the first thing is language. Is
Yeah.
if you want to do a pan India research, even if you weren't doing all the states, you would probably be doing between 14 to 18 languages. And this is how it's always done. It isn't a biggie for us. This is, we've always done that. We've learned as young researchers how
Yeah.
you, in your process for project management, you get all your languages done, you do back translations, you check it. So, I think that's one thing. The other is that face to face still does work. Now, it has limitations, which is why the sample sizes are larger in India than typically what you're used to. I would say one is because there is much more heterogeneity. So you necessarily need a much sample size, a larger sample size. And also the CPI in India is very low, really low. So it's
Okay.
become a sort of, works both ways. You can do more and it doesn't cost you to do it. So I think that's the other peculiarity that I'd put in. I think by and large, also Indian respondents are really can suffer long questionnaires more than anyone else. I think sometimes we overdo it, and there is an obvious decay in data quality if you have a long questionnaire. But I think there is, in many ways, they don't mind their interaction. If they've given you their time, they're quite generous of it. So I think that's also a peculiarity that I would talk about.
Amazing. And what are like the main players influencing the market research ecosystem today? Are they the big global companies, local companies, ResTech? How is it playing? Thinking about the whole research ecosystem.
It's a bit of a mix. So I think it did all start with the large research companies. Many of them were actually started off as Indian organizations and then were bought over by the large international agencies. I suspect at a particular time also there were regulatory reasons why that happened. Um, and I think clients also, the large clients pay are pretty influential because they have big budgets and they have expertise also in research. So, for example,
Yeah.
when we bring out our sizing report, the clients are interested in saying that I want to see, am I spending on what the market is doing? They keep aside budget for saying, let's not just do what we did for the last 5 years, let's have some budget to do the new kinds of researches that are happening. And these are the largest clients that you have in the market. So I think there's a fair amount of expertise and appetite for experimentation among the clients. So they do play an important role in that. We have a number of ResTech companies that have come about here, and I think a lot of more than 70% of the revenue that we generate in India is for international clients. So therefore, you have Indian entities who are selling to the US and all the leading edge buyer markets, and they are also having conversations in India as well, saying this is what's happening. So I think there are all of them have their role, and I think there's again an excitement about startups and what's the latest technology. And I was talking to someone at the SMR Congress in Prague last year, and we were a set of countries. We were having a discussion, and this gentleman was from Japan. And he said that probably Japan and India are the two markets where technology is adopted very easily. And I hadn't realized that. I had the perception of Japan being that way. But I think he's right because the mobile phone became so democratized. Things identity, YouTube, these are things that Indians are very comfortable with, the technology. So I think that's also something that why ResTech has found a natural place to be, and people are interested to know what they're doing.
Thing. I here in Brazil and in some parts of the world when I speak, because you were talking that clients like they set aside a budget to do the extra, the different, to experiment. And I have talked to a few clients here in Latam, and I see the opposite happening, like budgets shrinking. And of course, there is the pressure of doing a lot and more, but with less. So I find it really interesting because it's completely different from the reality that I've been talking to client side here. Like most of them are under pressure of doing a lot of AI on top of everything. Doesn't matter where or how, it just needs to be AI. It's a pressure that comes from their CEOs, from their global headquarters or whatever, that the budget will only be used for AI stuff. And you are going to have less research budget. You have to be more creative and stuff. So this is not happening in India, or is it happening in a different way?
I think it's happening, and it's probably happening alongside this. So I think definitely budgets are shrinking. We do know that headcount is under pressure everywhere. Wherever you look, it's under pressure. Um, but I think there is a fair amount of knowledge of what makes good research or bad research. So, and again, I think it helps that the CPI is low, so the traditional research isn't expensive. So I think the conversations within clients would definitely say that it's doing research that might be misleading with AI. So
Okay.
I think that the CMI folks have a pretty strong role, and that they have that able to have those conversations to say that, just doing a research that may be misleading isn't going to be the way to go. But the pressures are there. I mean, that I think they're everywhere. Yeah.
How do they influence back saying like we are not doing this because this is misleading? Because we have the same things here in Latam, I would say. For example, if I try to use large language models, traditional
Mm.
ones that have been trained in Western cultures or English data, actually,
Yes.
to predict innovation success, for example, I'm
Yeah.
sure it will come really off because it's a completely different need state and
Yeah.
necessities and stuff. But it's very hard to advocate this because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's there. So
Right.
how do you influence back what are your arguments to fight this back?
So I would think that even if, a lot of the people who are the CMOs or even the CEOs now, the CEO of Hindustan Unilever came from research
Yeah.
background, right? So she's a
Yes.
researcher. So I think they would listen. They understand why these arguments are important. That's not to say that sometimes the person just says, I don't care, but, just do it. But I suppose the way you would mitigate it is to say, okay, let's do it on a small scale and let's see how confident we are with the results. And, I suppose it would be something in that space to stand your ground, because after all, nobody wants research that misleads and loses the company money. So I guess that's the way it would be done.
What's like, did you have any experience with research technology and tool, and how was that?
So we have found in the Indian market that, like I said, the adoption is early. The adoption starts off with proper understanding of the checks and balances and limitations. And I think that you would have experimentation also and see whether there was a proof of concept. So we, in fact, had this, I think we did it last year, if I'm not mistaken. We actually, MRSI took a masterclass at Goa Fest, which is the
Yeah.
big advertising conference that happens. And we did a masterclass on insights and AI. And it was one of our clients, along with one of our agencies who's doing work on AI, that actually talk through what are the consideration, the plethora of tools, what has been done successfully, what has been done less successfully. So I think the experience in ResTech has been good, to say that it's not something we're going to fight. It's not something we're scared of. It's something we're going to adopt, but it's also something that we're going to uh, adopt responsibly as an industry. And it's like, for example, if you're looking at data or synthetic respondents, um, if you aren't refreshing the actual respondents that you use to build the synthetic personas, at some point it's going to start, it's going to be a form of a hallucination, isn't it? Because if you base it on respondents that you met 2 years ago and things have changed in your industry, and their new attributes, the category has changed, what are the synthetic personas going to give you if you use them for research? So I think that's That
Yeah.
would be a good example. So there is no resistance. I mean, in many ways, we're very proud to adopt whatever there is. It's always to say we're not scared of it, but we will look at what, where it can go wrong and what you need to watch for.
Thinking about the latest tools and technologies, which ones do you think like are really they really add value to the work, and which ones do you think are just hype and beautiful tech to display, if there is?
So the thing is that I'm not an actual practitioner, so I'm 2 degrees removed from this,
Yeah.
but because of our awards and our seminars, etc., the reasonable amount of exposure. So just give that as a proviso. Um, so anything in AI that gives efficiency is, it's a no-brainer. Why would you want to spend more hours if AI can help? So with some of the things
Yeah.
like content analysis and those kind of things, but always with the proviso to say that it still is artificial, the intelligence, and you must have human integration going back to see what is it that it's saying and does it make sense. So, has the, has the poor machine done the best the machine could do, but was it something that the machine wasn't told, which only a human can pick up. So I think that's those ones, like I said, absolutely no brainers. And, even in just writing things better, writing text better, it's like I said, it's a no brainer. Why would you want to do 3 drafts to get it right when AI can do it for you and you just have to do a second draft because AI gets it wrong? But at least they've written it in better grammar and more readable grammar than you.
Yeah.
I think that kind of stuff is ubiquitous everywhere, the
Yes.
GPT kind of things. I think where it's now being looked at in terms of whether it's adding value or not is in the next stage where you're trying to get synthetic data, when you're trying to use other agentic AI and things like that to understand, is it working, is it not working? But yeah, I mean, we had a new brand launch and we used AI to make an amazing ad film that, so it's yeah, it's why not, isn't it? It's there, it's making a difference, so why not?
Now, I would like to talk a bit about like talents and in the industry, and how is the market research professionals ecosystem? New people getting in the area, what you're doing to attract them to the area, how they are being trained, and what is going on there.
So I think that's something that we do think about quite a lot. And I think we're not doing a bad job. We are able to get good people. We are able to get, our professionals are of high standard. And I think a lot of Indian market research professionals are in leading roles across the globe. So,
Yes.
I think that is the good part of the story. I think there is a sense to say that we need to consider how to make research the career of choice. And, it's a little, most people have stories like mine, where it was that serendipity or a lucky accident that you came in
Yes.
to research it. And, we have been talking about this a lot, saying that, how do we do this better? We are thinking of a few things. One is to, for example, that when people are in college, to say, okay, let's try it out. We were also saying that, some people get into careers which get stale and boring after a point. Is there some way we can create skilling? So that, if you're in finance or a finance analyst or something and you say, that's not very exciting. Is there some way? But yeah, I think there is a sense to say that we don't have enough. And because it's not as many as we'd like to have, so then it starts getting stressful. So, you're poaching from each other, and clients also, they need to get CMI folks from somewhere. So it is a bit of a tension point for sure.
Yes, and what I heard a lot at the SMR is the concern about, okay, if we are, because in most clients they are laying off senior people, more experienced,
Yeah.
with 20 years of experience in the market, and
Yeah.
putting younger people which are a bit
Yeah.
cheaper, to replace them. But the cost of this is that this experience is not being passed. And that these people, these new people in their new roles, they are starting off with this pressure to use technology to do things faster, and they are not having the time to be trained. So I think a lot of people that I met there talked about the same thing. How do we guarantee that we are training the new professionals to understand what it was like before? You said in the beginning of the interview, like how we do sample planning, because I remember like 25 years ago doing calculations like I need these people. Here in Brazil, you had the maps of the whole city, and you
Yeah,
had to go in circles, knock on one door, then you skip to knock on another, those kind of things to ensure
yeah,
it
yeah,
was random. Because we had this, we are able to judge and to make assumptions on samples that are artificially created or whatever it is.
yeah.
Even in panels, we can look in a panel and judge if it's good or not. Where is it sourcing from? What kind of people is there? But if we don't know this, it's much harder to judge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I felt this huge concern about in 5, 10 years, where is the quality of market research going to be at? At some point, we talked about societies, organizations, and etc. They have this role of guaranteeing that the standards and the quality is not going to be missed in the future, even though budgets and people are and teams are shrinking, right? Any thoughts about how to deal with that?
So I think that's a very real pressure and a very real, you know, future stress for, I'd say, for the industry anywhere you are, because um, it's very difficult when you're looking only at financials to justify certain salaries and certain headcounts. And the days when you had, visionary thinkers who started companies and doing things right and doing things according to their vision and innovatively was much more important than, what the company would sell for. Those days are gone. There is a reality. The reality exists everywhere. Um, I mean, just perhaps one idea that I had, and I don't, we aren't executing it, but um, in the code of conduct and the SMR code, which I think all
Yes.
of us look at, um, one of the articles talks about it being very important to convey to clients what the sample is and what the limitations are of that sample. And I think perhaps that is something that we've moved away from, which I've seen moving away from my career. Because remember when we presented, that used to be something that you used to talk about, and you would spend 5 minutes talking about that whole thing, the setup and what the limitations were. And, probably after 10 years of my career, nobody had time. Tell me what it is. Tell me what, in one line, tell me what I need to do. That became something that people weren't interested in. But I think that could be one thing, that if we could just make it a point to put it somewhere and, say it again and again. So it just, even if it's, even if it's a footnote, right? Because you can't, people aren't going to give you 10 minutes to hear about it. But I think it's important to do that. And, I will share with you that I had an example. There was something where we were projecting to the universe, and, there was a lot of pressure. So somebody shared data with us and all of that. And I was just about to share it. And I realized that it was a raw sample and not weighted sample that I was looking at the proportions from. So I think these were really, top notch researchers. But I can understand with whatever pressures they have on them. These things are being forgotten. So I don't know if that makes me sound old and, the mother-in-law kind of thing. But I feel that these are important things to say. I mean, you have to talk about the code. You have to talk about duty of care. You have to talk about it is a duty when you're sharing research findings, even publishing research findings. These are basics. If you're just going to allow stuff to come up and then be surprised when it goes wrong and then people say market research doesn't know what it's doing in opinion polls. I think this is something I think about. And I don't know if it's practical. Maybe it's just boring and idealistic to talk about, but this is one thing.
I think you're in the right mind. And I know we sound old when we speak about this, but at the same time, experience is not something that you take for granted. I think experience comes from somewhere, helps you getting somewhere. For example, when I see synthetic data, I've seen like a bunch in many companies now. And when I see some of them, I see and I think, but it's a gut feel more because I know the country or I know this target or I know something from previous lives that makes me go like, this is not right. This is not good enough. But sometimes I look into it and I feel like, wow, this could be me or this could be my friends. This could be people I know. And normally, when I ask, okay, where did it come from? The good ones, they come from a very, very deep understanding of research, like constant iteration, constant feeding with more information and more things. It's not static. So I think in the past, when I worked at Research International, TNS, Cantor, GFK, all of those, we had those methodologies. So we are going to use this specific methodology for 5 years until we have a reboot or something. When you're thinking about synthetic data or anything that has the support of external information or other information to build it, I think we are talking about constant iteration, constant understanding, testing, retesting, and feeding, all those kind of things. So we are moving to a place where we are not going to have 5 year lasting methodologies. We are not going to have 5 year lasting black boxes. Actually, we will have the black boxes because I remember getting to clients and I felt so ashamed to get to my client and say, oh, this is part of the black box. We put all this data here and magically this number comes out because we have an algorithm or whatever that we cannot share because it's proprietary. This is, as a client now, it's not, it doesn't suffice. You need to understand, okay, what is this number? How you get there? And there is no proprietary at the moment because even if you know what I'm calculating or how, it still needs a bit of intelligence and technology that you might not have. So I think we are past that. I love to think of AI as glass box, not black box.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thinking about like foreign companies doing research in India or trying to do research in India, global projects trying to have, okay, let's do something in India. Is there anything specifically that people normally get wrong? Do you have any good stories to share?
Yes. So I think the first thing is that there isn't a sense of the heterogeneity. So, and also, therefore, the kind of sample sizes you need and how different across the length and breadth of the country it is.
Yeah.
So, so typically, if you have a country and you're doing 1,000 sample size, it's considered a good feat. But if you're talking about India, you even if you're just doing the top metros, you're looking at least 5,000, 3,000 to 5,000. So I think there is, there is. So I think that is one thing that, and a lot of the reason that number is embedded with people in global positions is because there's a cost attached to it. And then suddenly you realize that the cost in India is so much less. But 5,000 actually is costing the same as it costs you to do 500 or 600 in another market. And I remember back in the day, actually, this was when I was in advertising. So with YNR, and there was this brand asset valuator that YNR had, which was a proprietary, it was a brand, a way to map brands and map strategy within markets using brands. And I was talking to the US counterparts, and they were extremely uncomfortable because they didn't, getting it done out of the US was very expensive. But getting it done out of India meant that, they were having to hand over the quality and the judgment to someone on ground. And I remember one of the things that made them feel most uncomfortable was the cost, because it was ridiculously low. And I remember I had to tell them, you know what? This is what a burger costs in McDonald's in India. And this is what it costs you there, And I remember that was where they said, okay, fine. Some of it is actually just the currency and the standard of living. And I think it was a few cents, as I'm not mistaken, that a burger cost in
Yeah.
India. And it was really funny. But I remember that was, I said, how can I explain it to them? I mean, what is a common thing we could talk about? So that was one thing. And I think the other thing also is very often it's especially sort of global markets that work with, say, if you're looking at a global company that works mainly with Europe, a word means something in English, and there's a single word translation everyone knows if you wanted to put that word into Spanish or French or whatever. It isn't complicated.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas word, if you translate it even into English in India, means something else. If you wanted to use that word in English in Philippines, it would mean something else. So I think that these things get taken for
Yeah.
granted. Nobody even thinks about it. They're
Yes.
in doing a global role. And yeah, so I think that's something really interesting. And so that was one of the things that I noted that, we worked closely with SMR for the new code. And this was something SMR did on their own, where the earlier code was written in very British English. And it was understandable, but some of the idioms or the way you put together a sentence, people don't understand that kind of English. So they actually changed. If you look at the new code versus the old one, it's more neutral English. There are less idioms in it.
Yeah.
It's more straightforward. So I
Less
think that's
posh and less complicated.
yeah, and no, or less colloquial.
Yeah.
Yeah, so more, simplified, because
Yeah.
everyone had to understand what you were saying. The words only had to mean, and even, there are things like in India, and this is again a multi-country experience I had at Vodafone, where it was, there was a particular Northern European country, and you said, will you do it by this time? And they said, yes, we'll do it by this time. And I said, are you sure you're going to do it by this time? They said, we told you we're going to do it by this time. Like, why are you even asking me? I said, yes, what is wrong with you? And then there was a Southern European country, and it was all, oh, we can't do it. We can never do it. We need 20 more days. And even when you said, okay, so you need 20 more days, we give you that. Even on the 20th day, when you told them, it was, oh my God, we had so many problems, give us another 20 days. And in India, that was saying, you want us to do it? Yeah, definitely. You want us to? Of course, we'll do it. And I said, no, that is definitely doesn't mean definitely as it does in English. It means we'd love to do it. And we'd be really happy if we do it. But, you have to have another 2 or 3 stages of conversation before. And, with India, for example, if it isn't people who are used to speaking to global people, that, you need to give them time and iterations to be sure that they're going to get back with what you want in the manner in which you want it. So, yeah, I think we'd find it very difficult to say no is really, yeah, people don't.
Yeah, Latinos are like Brazilians are like this as well. We normally say, yes, we are going to do our best. And in the
Yeah.
back office, we are like, this is impossible, right? How we are going to do this? But
Yeah.
let's try. But
Yeah.
we won't say, no, we don't do it.
Yeah.
It's part of the
Yeah.
cultural side of things. And I remember working with Mexico in the past. And there is this sentence that they say, oh, ahorita, that means right now. It's a
Okay.
very cute way to say right now. So whenever they use that word, that means I won't do it. But they said I like I'm not proficient in Spanish. So if they told me I'm doing this right now, I would believe, turn off the call, and I was like, hey, they're doing it as we speak. And then it would be like 1 week, 2 weeks, and nothing happens. And then I would call them again, and they would say, right now, ahorita. And we would be in this eternal loop until one day,
Yeah.
a Mexican person that was my friend said, ahorita means I won't do it. You have to find other ways to influence to get this from them because they
Yeah.
won't do it.
Yeah.
They won't say no and they
Yeah.
want you to go away. So, and it's a very cute word in
Yeah.
Spanish. It's really
Yeah.
cute. So you end up the call in a very pleasant and beautiful tone,
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone happy, but
Yeah.
one is genuinely happy and the other
Yeah.
one thinks he is happy.
Absolutely. Similar thing in India where we say 5 minutes. And five
Okay.
minutes doesn't mean, I don't know what it means. It can mean 10 years. It can mean one
Okay.
minute. It can mean 3 hours. It's, and then suggest it's 5 minutes. Like, it is 5 minutes. Don't worry about it. Okay. I'm worried.
But it can be
So
10 years.
it can be anything.
Now, just the last round of questions, rapid fire questions. What is your favorite research methodology?
Oh, I haven't a clue. I really don't have a clue.
Really? Oh, that's amazing. So there are many that you like, or there are none
Yeah,
that you like?
no, so it's like even something like brand tracking, which is so
Yeah.
boring, can be so amazing, right?
Yeah.
And qualitative, which side it can be so interesting, can give you such garbage, if you
Yeah.
don't have a good researcher and you don't have somebody who's getting the respondent to really answer. Yeah, and then of course, some of the
Yeah.
models which have benchmarks and things like need scope and all of that, they're very satisfying because they're very new. But again, it needs very deep understanding of your category and where it's coming from. So yeah, I don't think there's a favorite.
Yeah. Well, I think your favorite is whatever brings you the excitement and seeing the
Yeah,
data, right?
yeah.
Amazing. What is the coolest trend or innovation in the area?
I think it's AI and where AI can take us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. But it has limitations. I think I'm in this find it difficult to not tend to do a rapid fire and not give you a proviso. So maybe I need to edit my provisos
No,
up.
no. Tell me why.
No, so again, I mean, there are a lot of books being written and people talking about how the machines are talking to other machines. So
Yeah.
it is, yeah, it's like scary science fiction also, there's robots going to take over and how can we check, right? You can check the truth of it based on the experience of a human being. But 5 years from now, are there going to be human beings with the same experiences? So yeah,
Yeah. We
scary.
don't know.
We don't know.
Well, I always ask whenever I'm using AI, whatever it is, I always say, please, thank you, because I'm scared if they come back, they will haunt me. So if I'm not here, I don't want them to be cross at my lack of politeness. And what would be your one piece of advice for the newcomers in the market research industry?
Uh, I think understanding a bit of the history. What are the old textbooks? What are the old methodologies? Just it, it is familiarize, like figuring out where it came from. Don't take what you're fed today as something that says enough. It's
Yeah.
it's likely to be a tool more than a philosophy or more than an intellectual underpinning.
Thank you so much, Vitali. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Today, I talked to Mitali Chowhan. She's the Director General at the Market Research Society in India, and she's based in Mumbai. And she brought a lot of experience with the cerebral work that is being done by agencies and by companies in India. She talked about the CPI and how much it affects projects in India, what is the future of AI and how she sees AI evolving in the region. And she talked a lot about careers and how we can help and what are the basic things that all newcomers need to know, need to be familiarized with to be able to do a great job in market research. Sally, thank you so much for today. It was a pleasure to get to know you more and know more about the Indian market research landscape.
Thank you, Cynthia. It was amazing to talk to you. Really enjoyed the last hour. And yeah, I think also what I really enjoyed was for all our differences, so many of the things are so much in common, isn't it? It's
Yes,
the
yes.
world is a small place. And it's lovely to realize how close we all are.
And I think to learn from other regions and other perspectives, sometimes something that happens in India can help me out when
Yeah.
dealing with something similar in Brazil. Maybe we don't deal with things the same way, but we can learn from the best practices and adapt to the way that would work in Brazil. So I think that's the richness of speaking to everyone in different regions and getting to know more about the research landscape.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and stay tuned for upcoming episodes and subscribe to Insight platforms to get all the industry news straight into your mailbox every week. Thank you and see you soon. Bye.
Bye bye.